And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Tuesday, October 19th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories right here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Native American farmers and ranchers in the U.S. Department of Agriculture on October 19th announced a historic agreement to settle a nationwide class action lawsuit called Keepsego versus Vilsack that alleged discrimination in USDA's farm loan program dating back to 1981. The agreement brings to an end 11 years of litigation and marks the beginning of what is expected to be a new partnership between USDA and the Native American community. Under the agreement, which was unveiled in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. before Judge Emmett Sullivan, USDA will pay $680 million in damages to thousands of Native American farmers and ranchers and forgive up to $80 million worth of outstanding farm loan debt. The settlement also provides for a host of initiatives that will improve USDA's farm loan services for and to Native Americans. The Oklahoma chapter of the Associated Builders and Contractors, Inc., or ABC, presented Flintco, Inc. with 13 awards for constructive excellence recently. Two of those awards recognize Flintco's construction of Native American projects, the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino Tulsa in Catoosa, Oklahoma, and the Chickasaw Nation Indian Medical Center in Ada, Oklahoma. As the largest Native American-owned construction company currently in its third generation of privately held Native American ownership, it's especially rewarding to be recognized for work with Native American tribes, says Robin Flint Ballinger, chairman of the Flintco, Inc. Board of Directors. By building on tribal lands, we are dedicated to creating jobs as well as improving the quality of life for those who inhabit them. These awards were presented at the ABC Excellence in Construction Awards banquet at the Greenwood Cultural Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma on October 14th. The awards are considered the premier competition within the construction industry there. Rulings by two federal judges will continue to prevent the state of New York from collecting taxes on some Indian cigarette sales while tribes continue their legal fight against an issue that has caused tension for decades. But Governor David Paterson's administration said recently the state is closer than ever to settling the issue after one of the judges confirmed the state's right to tax reservation cigarette sales to non-Indian customers and said doing so would not infringe upon tribal sovereignty. U.S. District Judge Richard Arcara in last week denied the Seneca and Cayuga Nations' request for a preliminary injunction against the tax, saying it is unlikely that the Western New York tribes could substantiate their claims that it would overburden them and impinge upon their sovereignty. And today we go to Alaska Public Radio Network News Director Lori Townsend on an update on the news from the northwest coast of the continent. Lori Townsend, the Alaska Federation of Natives is meeting in Alaska. You want to give us a little update on the Native News Update today?
Hello, Paul. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. AFN, Alaska Federation of Natives, is meeting this year in Fairbanks. They've started alternating years. Now, next year, the plan is to be in Anchorage, and I will be able to be there. I wasn't able to be in Fairbanks this year, but we've got some folks from other stations that will be providing reports to us. And right now, the elders and youth portion of things are going on, and they're talking about getting out the vote, about preserving language and culture, about the strength of Native men, and that's being hosted live by Sharon McConnell of Blueberry Productions, who's also hosting with Anna Sattler, and they'll be doing that. And people can watch online. They can either go to 360north.org or firstalaskans.org and watch live streaming of the proceedings there. The main convention gets started on Thursday, right. And there's kind of a resounding theme throughout this year of village survival and looking at it from a lot of different perspectives, either helping build economies or how people can look at innovative ways of better energy that's less costly, because that's one of the things that, of course, rural communities are up against is the extremely high cost of power in villages. And of course, that's part of the reason that it's so difficult to have any kind of industry or jobs come into the areas, just because the expense to do business there is just astronomically high.
Hasn't there been a great outflux of young Native people leaving those traditional villages and going to the city and elsewhere? Yes,
that's another big problem, is young people leaving the villages because they have to. They have to go find work, and it's difficult. And it's hard for people to stay connected to their village, to the food that they like, to their culture, to their language, when they have to just kind of come into the big melting pot in the urban centers. But it has become an increasing necessity, both for young people looking for work, but also in some cases it's young women trying to get away from areas where there's no law enforcement and they have no protection. And so young women get tired of being concerned about their safety in places where there's just no one that can assist them. There's a lack of village public safety officers. There's a lack of law enforcement generally in many villages. And oftentimes it can be 2 or 3 days, especially in the wintertime, before a state trooper can get out to check on something. So if you have a domestic violence situation with possibly alcohol involved, it can be very, very dangerous for young women. So there is an influx into the cities, and there's a lot of concern, and that's will also, I'm sure, be a big area of discussion during the convention this year.
Tell me a little bit about the assembly itself for people in the lower 48. What is it? Who is it? And they're meeting annually, and you gave us a little bit of the agenda. Do they have some political clout, economic or elsewhere?
Yeah, they do. They get together. There's delegates from all of the villages, and they do vote on resolutions. They vote on policy for their communities, and it's a strong voice. It's about 20% of the population here is Native people, and so that does have political power. And they do help craft ongoing policy initiatives that may be in front of this next session of the legislature. So there is voting that happens. There's officers that are voted back into office or other people run. And it's a big political gathering, but it's also a really wonderful social and cultural gathering as well. There's a lot of people come to AFN with with handicrafts and artwork, everything you can imagine, from beadwork to skin sewing to just phenomenal pieces of carved art, ivory, lots and lots of things, and really creative things too. It's a delight to walk through that area of the convention. And it's also a great place for people to Christmas shop, and it's a way for many people who live a largely subsistence life and barter for a lot of things to have some cash so that they can buy fuel and be able to get out to hunt and fish, because, of course, you need gas to get out into the backcountry, and you need bullets. So this is a way to make a little cash off some of that beautiful artwork that they bring in.
Give us that URL that the Blueberry Productions is producing and live streaming again. People want to go there?
Yeah, it's 360north.org is one of the channels, and that's the number 360 North. Right. And then firstalaskans.org is also streaming.
Good. You said something about a nice wind project that's developing up there. What is it going to do for the energy costs nationwide or locally in communities? Yeah, it's like Alaska. You got these oil wells coming out of the ground, and they head off, and then it comes back. People are paying $8 or $9 a gallon for gasoline. What's this wind project about?
Yeah, that's one of the sad ironies of the fact that Alaska is an oil-producing state, but the people in rural Alaska pay the highest cost of energy anywhere. And unfortunately, this wind project won't help rural Alaska, but it could help South Central Alaska greatly. And it is a project of CIRI, Cook Inlet Region Incorporated, one of the Alaska Native corporations that's the South Central Corporation. They're wanting to develop this 33 wind turbine wind farm on Fire Island, which is just off the coast of Anchorage. You can see Fire Island from Anchorage. And it would, once it's up and running, it would supply enough power for about 17,000 homes in South Central Alaska, which is very significant. And also, South Central Alaska is at risk of, and it is currently dangerously low, I shouldn't say dangerously, is low on oil or on gas reserves for heat and electricity. And the city has tested and kind of an emergency alert system where if there's a case in the wintertime where we're really, really low on gas reserves, that they would send out this alert to have people diminish their use very quickly to try to get us through these kind of rough spots. There is some exploration going on in Cook Inlet, not as much as there was in the past. There's been some legislative action to try to spur incentives for more exploration in Cook Inlet. Part of the problem is that there's enough gas being produced currently, but there's no place to store it. So they're exporting what we don't use, and then in the wintertime when we need more of it, there isn't any supply. But there was some legislation passed last year that will build a storage facility, and that should happen in the next few years so that they will be able to store some for wintertime use here in South Central. Yeah. But this wind farm will be a way to, once it's developed, if it's developed, they've got a ways to go yet. They're trying to get commitment from 4 utilities here in South Central to enter into power purchase agreements with CIRI, and they hope to have that done by November so that they can present this package to the RCA Regulatory Commission of Alaska in December. Part of the reason they want to do that is because they want to stay on this timeline to start construction in the spring. Yeah. But they also are in line for some federal funding if they stay on this timeline. So they want to meet that so they can access those millions.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to get back to you. We're out of time for today's program. I wanted to ask you one short little question. Have you had a chance to ask Joe Miller any tough questions lately?
We've repeatedly asked Joe Miller to respond to some of what's been going on, and he won't respond to our repeated calls, emails, attempting to get some questions answered. So far, he's...
Are news organizations concerned about what happened up there? I mean, I'd like to get right. I'd like to get right in the pack if that's what's going to happen. That sounds exciting. Asking a question and getting handcuffed.
It was very disturbing, and a week ago yesterday, Joe Miller announced to the Alaska Press that he would no longer answer questions about his background or his record from the past and his personal background. He said he was being attacked. It was an unprecedented attack on his personal life, and he would no longer answer our questions. Prior to him making that announcement to the Alaska Press Corps, he gave about a 7-minute interview to Greta Van Susteren of the Fox cable channel, and then refused. He admonished us for what he said was illegal leaks of information from his personnel file at the Fairbanks North Star Borough when he was an attorney there. And that's when he told us he would no longer answer questions about his background. But then he just walked off and refused to answer any questions at all. And so far, all of these things that have happened now in this last week, he has refused to answer our questions. He's talked to Fox, he's talked to CNN, but he won't talk to us.
Politics is an interesting animal at times. I thought the Navajo Nation presidential race was exciting, but Alaska's heating up. Lori, we'll talk to you again soon, all right? Thank you very much for joining with us today.
Thanks, Paul.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Miigwech for showing up. Come back again soon.